Some of us are over 60. And if we are over 60, we have lived through a revolution. And that revolution was the 60s, the 1960s. And what is a revolution? A revolution is an attempt to change the established order. And we, what am I saying? Some of us who are over 60 have done this, and have done this peacefully without doing what the French did in the French Revolution or what the Russians did. We didn't decapitate anybody. We lived peacefully through a revolution without noticing it. Oh, some of us noticed it, I talked about it, but we just lived through something, and the world has changed very much in many important respects as a result of the 60s. The 60s have created a more egalitarian society, and the 60s have given some kind of a power to people who had been disadvantaged, mainly the blacks. It was a civil rights movement in the United States that has very much influenced Canada, and those of us who are over 60 and remember all this. Now in the CBC, that's what we're talking about, what I'm talking about, and I lived through it in the CBC. The CBC, this was exceedingly noticeable. And not only within the CBC as an institution, but also what the CBC did in the way it reflected and influenced the country. And the program that did it was This Hour Has 7 Days, and some of us who are over 60 remember it. It's a very exciting time, exciting program. It was a time when the CBC mattered in a way it does not matter now. And that particular program, which is now remembered with nostalgia by people over 60, was hugely successful. It was mandatory viewing. Only Hockey Night in Canada, I think, maybe I'm wrong about that, but let us say it was comparable with Hockey Night in Canada, and you know what that means. It was really universal viewing. And everybody talked about it, and it was hugely important, and people had a sense of its importance. And it had a history. It was from 1964 to 1966, the rise and fall, because it triggered a crisis, almost a peaceful civil war of a kind on a cultural issue, namely broadcasting and what it does, that of an intensity that had not been experienced in Canada at all, except in conflicts about language, French-English conflicts. But this was a cultural conflict of a different kind. And it created a crisis in 1966 when the program came to an end, which led to a finale, which can be compared only with the end of Hamlet, which, as no doubt you remember, everybody is dead. The stage is littered with corpses. That was the end of 7 days. Mind you, everybody survived. And it is a reflection of the way that things are done, is that all those who seemed dead at the end of 1966 were resurrected and had perfectly normal careers afterwards, one way or another. But there are some exceptions. However, okay, let me now begin. And this is how I have to begin. By 1964, the beginning of 7 days, there had already been a number of programs in other countries which had shaken the nation. And I am referring to the program in England, that's the week that was, which was similarly absorbing and was in a sense a precedent, which was had also the same element of defiance of normal good conduct. What had been considered good conduct, it was defiant. And in the United States, there was Edward R. Murrow, and See It Now, and some of us who are over 60 remember this, and especially now we remember his courage when he spoke up against Senator McCarthy towards the end of a long program, because Murrow had already been an established journalist, broadcast journalist by that time. Anyhow, he attacked, and on the grounds of decency, he attacked Senator McCarthy, who had been a demagogue and a very unpleasant character. And Murrow, with great courage, it was difficult for the CBS network, his managers, to decide whether to support him or not. He was in danger for a while. However, he won, he did it, and it was, okay, these were kind of precedents. But in Canada, it all took a very different shape. And it was, for me personally, it was very important because I was involved. I was, first of all, the department in which I had served, if that is the word, for about 10 years, 11 years, the Department of Talks and Public Affairs. That was the department that launched that program. My department. And we all took pride in it. It was very exciting. And the two people who were the main characters, that is Doug Leiterman and Patrick Watson, were members of our department. They were experienced radio journalists. They were not hotheads. They were not that young. They were in their 30s. They were entirely respectable members of the community. They were married. Leiterman had done many documentaries, and Watson had done all kinds of other things. He had done, for example, he had a program called Inquiry in Ottawa, which is a public affairs program. An ordinary, worthy, very capable and successful CBC producer, journalist. And then there was my boss, Reeves Hagen, who was the head of the department, a successor of Frank Pierce, who had led the department in a previous contretemps with management, Mr. Integrity, the press called him, who was acting on a matter of principle, opposing management and opposing authority in a sense, and had one of the most successful conflicts of this kind. He was promoted as a result. Management loved him as a result. And were all very interesting and unexpected, I suppose. And Reeves Hagen, who was Irish and not a native Canadian, but he had become he had been a producer in an area supervisor, we called him, in Ottawa, and he managed to meet lots of politicians and important people, and he was very political, and he was very good at it. And he was very capable. And two characters, Leiterman and Watson, developed a program, a magazine program, which was designed to be what they called mandatory viewing. Everyone in the country was to watch this program, and so they did once it was launched, the magazine program. And they recruited a French-Canadian first time co-host Laurier Lapierre, who was debonair and charming and very French, and who was a professor at McGill, and who flew in from Toronto every week to participate in this program. And there was a cover girl, Dinah Christie, who was a chanteuse, a singer, and who was amusing and attractive. And she was the daughter of the famous actors, both of them Stratford, Robert and Margot Christie, and who was very engaging. And there was an element of satire which we had inherited or copied from the BBC, from That's the Week That Was. And that was written by all kinds of bright people, including Maeve Moore, who was an important man of the theatre in Canada. And there was a kind of congregation of talent. And they began, and they came with a plan to the bosses, my crowd, Reeves Hagen, and Reeves liked that, and then he put it to senior management. And it was at a time when CTV, the competition, another private network, was beginning to be very big, and the top management welcomed this program as it was promised to have a mass audience. Television was ready-made for a mass audience, was a mass medium. And top management considered this and said, wonderful, terrific, go right ahead. Go right ahead. Go right ahead. And they did, and management loved it at first. And when it was as successful as the inventors of that program predicted, management had very good reason to regret it.